All right. Welcome to the Lead Generation World Conference. We are on our day 3, session number 2. We've got a great lineup for the rest of the week, but we're going to knock a couple more sessions out today. Before we get started, I do want to remind you all, it's the same thing I've said before every session, but definitely participate. If you have questions, you can use either the Whova app to ask questions using QA, or you can use the Zoom app. Either way, we'll see them, and I'll go ahead and ask our presenter the questions at the end of the session and go from there. But please participate. It definitely helps out. Provide more information from the experts that we have on online. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome Owen Wood. He's the director of Marketing. We're going to be talking about time management and how to optimize it so you can actually close more leads into sales. So Owen, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away from here.
Thanks very much, Michael. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming on by and actually watching this live. If you're watching this via video after, welcome as well. So yeah, just a quick bit about what this is about. So this is very much a chat. So as you can see, it's me on my soapbox here. There's going to be no real presentation. It's just going to be me kind of waving my hands around like a madman as we have a chat. So I mean, you may or may not have heard of me. If you haven't heard of me, fair enough. So basically, I'm the founder of Marketing, and essentially for 7 years now, we are we're a lead generation and sales agency, and pretty much all of our campaigns, previously and currently, have either been partially or completely pay on results. That can actually be kind of a scary thing if you think about it. The idea is that, we're putting ourselves out there, all of this effort, without actually necessarily having that kind of same billable hour kind of certainty about this is a dead cert, we're definitely going to make this kind of money. Now, one of the things actually that inspired this chat is because that is very similar to how I'm sure a lot of you are feeling when it comes to managing your sales team. You promise a certain amount of money, depending on what country you're in, it could be a good few £1,000s or, several $1,000s a month on the expectation that they're going to make you a certain amount of money back. That is an important thing to fully acknowledge, that is something that you are really actually focusing the team on, and there's an element of risk there. And so basically for the last 7 years, myself and our team have been essentially designing and setting up campaigns which we know are going to be profitable for our clients, but also work for us in a pay on results kind of way. And very early on, we had to learn what different factors kind of made a campaign profitable for us and for the client. Now we have had this in a variety of ways. Even now our sales team is partly split. About 75% of them are hourly rate with a bonus, so much similar to how you would likely structure your sales team. But then the remaining 25% are still on a commission-only basis, and we've had a commission-only team in various forms for about 5 years now. And actually, just quickly on that, whilst this, we're talking about the element of risk, and isn't promising all this money, to as part of a salary like a scary thing, and wouldn't it be so much more solved if we just didn't have to deal with that anymore? And so commission-only salespeople can seem like a really viable way, but actually, if you're thinking of it like that, then you may actually just be passing the problem along and not actually really kind of solving it. Because commission-only salespeople famously do have a very short attention span. It works for you as long as it continues to work for them. There's in fact actually an even greater emphasis on making sure that they are going to make money out of it, basically, because the moment that they're not, then they're gone, basically. So a bit to kind of now, there's now a team of 20 of us with 2 full-time managers. And essentially what we've been able to do over the last 7 years is tweak all of these different factors into essentially we've got a bespoke system now where we've been able to systemize all of these different factors into essentially a series of levers and dials, where we tweak each campaign and we have a lot of visibility over things. And one of the important starting points was really actually trying to see it from our client's end, and in this case, the sales manager's end. So, somebody who actually manages a sales team, but also from the salesperson's end, what's their life like, in terms of, their, the 8 hours that they're dedicating to being on the phone and being charming as hell. What's happening, who are they speaking to? Things like that. And this kind of comes back to this kind of time management question that this whole chat is about. It's actually more about creating certainty. Really, it's like everybody knows that salespeople are relentlessly optimistic. And they're saying, that 500 grand deal is sure to come in this month. They said they just need to sign it. But, how can you bank on that as a sales manager? How do you know that regardless of whatever happens, that salespeople call in sick, somebody, starts, has a dip in morale, the quality of the data changes. There are some wider economic factors, hello COVID. There's some changes to a particular company's focus, so it's going to delay in them actually signing. All of these things. How do you know that you're definitely going to make a certain amount of money each month? And that's a big question. In light of all of these uncertainties and everything that life is trying to throw at you. How can you be sure that, when you say, here is your £3,000 this month, Mr. Salesperson, I hope you have a great day. How do you know that you're going to get 60 grand a month out of that kind of thing? And a lot of it actually comes from, obviously we'll talk about time management, but a lot of it actually comes from everybody being really honest about how time is being used first off. So first off, it's always good as a starting point to really be very open and have very good KPIs, which actually really kind of show how somebody's time being used. And KPIs can be a really good way to kind of create a common language between you and the salesperson about the right activities which move conversations in a direction that, statistically speaking, will move a certain amount of conversations in that direction to create however much money that you need. So a lot of this is data driven, and a lot of this is about insight. It is those two things which can then kind of guide your management of somebody's time. Essentially, I've done this talk a couple of times, it really kind of boils down to, so much can get done in a conversation. I'll give you, I'll actually give you a direct example. So I still do a bit of selling for ourselves as well. And literally just last Friday, we had one meeting with a client that's going to turn it, that's already turned into 4 grand a month, is going to turn into 8 grand a month as well. And that was just one conversation. It's like, great, cool. Isn't that amazing? How often do those conversations come up? How unexpected is that? How frequent can you expect these? And more importantly, what factors are affecting them? That's the important thing to really, that essentially we're going to be talking about. Essentially, this whole thing boils down to a list of kind of degrees of interest. If you think about it, kind of bringing it out a bit, to what we're actually saying here, is that when you have a salesperson and you pay them a salary, and you are hiring them for a certain amount of time, what you're actually doing is allocating a certain budget, and and that budget is going to get used on a daily basis. And if you think about that, there's kind of a spectrum of interest, which I will be sharing one of our blogs with you a bit later, so you can actually see this spectrum of interest. But just to give you a bit of an indication here, you have on one end somebody has never heard of you before. And maybe actually even, on the lower end of awareness, you don't know a lot about them either. And then the other side of things is somebody is, maybe has signed with you already and they're so happy that they want to sign again. And in between, there's all of these different levels of interest, essentially. Now, essentially, that's kind of where your salesperson's time is going to be allocated, is essentially going to be speaking to people with varying degrees of interest during the day. Now, typically, sales jobs are kind of boiled down into the two kind of main factors, and especially traditional sales jobs. There's kind of two main key activities that a salesperson is expected to do. There's what's commonly known as prospecting, which is essentially finding people who are interested. And then there's the actual sales part of things, which is essentially quoting and closing those sales. So there is finding people who are interested and then convincing those people to sign up. Now, there's a kind of a hangover stigma from old school sales days where there's kind of this assumption that as long as somebody is really charming, as long as there's somebody who's just super charming, that they can just do it all, and actually, in some cases, when we've spoken to clients, this is kind of, this mentality has come out when it's almost assumed that giving any support whatsoever is almost seen as kind of doing their job for them. And it's almost kind of people balk at the idea that you would even that is good for like 1 in 1,000 people, basically. That works in the rarest of cases, but it's one of those kind of representation things that, because it does work in those rare cases, it's widely publicized, and then everybody assumes that that's how you do it. Just through sheer willpower alone, you can mentally dominate somebody into actually signing up. Then this kind of, especially the sales managers today were the salespeople that grew up in that environment. They were junior salespeople when that was the main way of thinking. That can still hang over, and that's still like a common thought. Your sales manager gets a bit, for want of a better word, a bit Wolf of Wall Street about things. Like the film where they just yell down the phone and somehow that's going to convince somebody that their proposal makes sense. So this is kind of, or at least there can be this kind of dismissiveness of the different factors which go into making a certain amount of sales a certainty. Now, essentially, we take the opposite approach. We aim to set up campaigns with everything to such a statistical certainty. I always have trouble saying that word. Statistical certainty that whilst we do want to hire the best people possible, people with relevant experience and the right way of talking, the idea is that even if at a later stage it just turned out somebody was just, okay, we've lined up everything in terms of the data, what they're doing, the script, what we're actually offering the customer, the particular angle that we're going at, the training that's available. Everything is set up so that even if it just turned out somebody was just, okay, we'd still probably hit target. So that's every campaign we set up. We want it to be like that. That's a really good thing from your end as a sales manager, because the more that you can do that, the more sure that you can be that somebody's going to make you money. And that means, that's just good. That's just a good thing. But also, when you actually take it from the salesperson's point of view as well, it's an equally important thing. Yes, you do need good, charming salespeople that are actually going to be, self-starterishness and, all those buzzwords which people usually say in interviews. But it's, you as a manager, you do actually have a lot of control over how your sales team perform. And actually, just to kind of highlight this, of course, in the UK, end of the financial year just went in April. And I did ask a few of our clients, how did their sales team fare in regards to hitting their target? And essentially, I was asking that because if the answer was anything other than we've exceeded our new business target for this year, then there is probably something that can be done to improve that salesperson's performance. And a lot of it just comes down to time management. So I'm sure you've probably heard the phrase, time, your time is money. Time is money. A lot of busy people in suits usually say it. And therefore it should be spent wisely. And I actually remember this in one of my first ever sales jobs, back when I was, just a chatty teenager, basically. I never went to uni. And so I just found myself in sales jobs because they were just kind of fun. And actually I saw this in real life that, in the much bigger companies and the enterprise level companies, they've actually gone to the trouble of splitting up those two processes, essentially. There's the prospecting and then there's the quoting and closing. Because they are two very distinct skills, first off. But also, if you think about it as, actually from a pragmatic point of view, there's, the team that does the qualified appointment setting, so actually getting, lining up the quote meetings. And then there's a separate team who essentially took that quote to closing stage. You as a manager, which bit makes you money? And it's actually the second bit. It's the getting them to sign the damn thing. That's the bit that's actually going to make you money. And if you look at, again, you don't necessarily want to see this in all facts and figures, but you as a sales manager, your business development manager or your field sales manager or whatever you call them, they probably have a higher salary than, somebody who's just doing the telemarketing. So, that's the bit that makes you money. And, that's the bit that is probably going to be the most expensive as well. And in SMEs, a lot of the time, they hire that one person to do both jobs. And usually this is actually kind of reflected in what's said in the recruitment industry quite a lot. It's a 360 sales role. Which, usually that basically means you're given a phone book and a phone and, pick up the phone and make us some money kind of thing. Essentially, it's a role where you basically have to find your own sales by, making your own pipeline. Now, whilst that may seem very elegant and simple from a sales manager point of view, it's way less efficient, basically. Mainly because, that person's time is very dependent. That person's performance is very dependent on the actual quality of the data that you're providing them with. Despite the fact that a lot of salespeople openly brag about their sales prowess, which is kind of a lame brag if you think about it. It really is actually that's, because fundamentally, if somebody has never heard of you or they're busy or, they're not ready to buy or, it's not even actually relevant to them in the first place, that's all of those examples are something that you would not want, your 50K a month, field sales manager of 50K a year rather. 50K a month, that'd be pretty good. Your 50K a year field sales manager, why the hell are they speaking to them? They shouldn't have been speaking to them in the first place. What's more is, if you actually think about, even if you have gone to the trouble of, providing your salesperson with a list of really warm, highly interested kind of leads, ones which you think are, particularly good. Data ages. And what I mean by that is data decreases in quality. We call it kind of aging in our particular thing, where you kind of need to let it sit for a bit afterward. Now, just to give you the analogy of this, is that, say, like if you have 100, like a list of 100 kind of really warm leads, you will call all 100. You'd likely get answers out of 20 of them, so either yeses or nos, and then you'd call that 80, and then you'd get answers out of another 20, either yeses or nos, and then you'd call the remaining 60, and then you'd get some answers as well. But what's important here is that the people that you're kind of left with are the ones which actually didn't pick up the first time, didn't pick up the second time, didn't pick up the third time, the fourth time they were busy. So actually it doesn't mean that you're going to continue to get, all of, it's not a linear progression. What you're actually left with are, for want of a better word, the dregs. Those people that right now, at this particular moment in time, they just do not have time to talk to you. Now, that's not to say that they're not interested in the future, but this is why we call it kind of data kind of ages, and you need to let it sit. And the idea is that it's, after a certain time, we usually say after about 5 rings, it's probably worth leaving it for a few months with those, and then coming back to them in a few months' time. But then, then it comes back to, okay, well, how are we using our sales team's time? And essentially, you need a good supply, a continuous supply of, good, new quality leads. And, you need to provide, it's not just about kind of providing names and numbers just so that they can get on with it. Because it's also actually, a good thing to really think about the quality of the conversations that your sales team are actually having. Now, the more interested people that you speak to, the more sales that you're going to make, basically. And going back to that analogy of, those kind of 4 or 5 things that I said about, if somebody's not really available right now, they're not ready to buy, they're still in contract, it's not something that they would have looked at in the first place, they're the wrong person, that's not a very good use of their time. And so the more that you can whittle that out early, the better that, the more fruitful amount of conversations that your sales team are going to be having. And then therefore, they're going to get you more sales, and that's going to be better for everybody. So essentially, this is what I'm kind of getting at, is that, kind of salespeople are a charming bunch, but, and I'd like to think that, we're a charming bunch as well. But, the actual people that we're speaking to are heavily dependent on our results, essentially. If, for example, if you're having to sift through contacts where somebody's not there, somebody's on hold, somebody's giving you the runaround, that's a really big time suck on your day. And especially when you're doing enterprise sales, before you know it, it's 3 p.m. and you haven't spoken to anybody, let alone, somebody who's interested. And it's important to kind of think of it like this, because, it actually comes back to time management in a lot of ways. There was this one client that I was speaking to once, where he was particularly asking about how much, how they could increase the amount of sales that they make. And the first thing I asked him was, how much time does your team actually spend on quoting and closing sales? And then the next, kind of question I asked was then, how much time does your sales teams, spend on kind of finding somebody who's potentially interested? And he then kind of remarked that apparently the data that they use, it's worked so far. They got it from this one source, but it would either be perfect or really bad, basically. He estimated that of of every 100 contacts he would give a particular salesperson, 3 of them, it would be relevant for them to speak to. The 97% of them is not really relevant for them. But those 3 people that their sales team that they would speak to, they had a really high conversion rate on those 3. Now, just to kind of give a bit of context on this, they were paying this salesperson £30,000 a year to go through this. So I kind of flipped it on him. I said, essentially, well, if you pay 30,000 a year, do you realize that approximately £900 of that is actually spent speaking to the right people? The remaining £29,100 is wasted time. And it's kind of like, if you actually think of it like that, theoretically, he could maintain his existing sales just by paying a salesperson £900 a year to call in those specific times. But moreover, if he replaced that salesperson's data with only from this 3%, he really just focused on this 3%, then he would, be getting astronomically better results. And it's simply more actually about pre-qualifying the data to focus on that. And this is kind of where we're kind of coming at, like the point of this essentially is that salespeople are a charming bunch, but they don't work miracles. If they're not speaking to the right people, then it adds time. It means that your budget is being spent on something which actually ultimately isn't going to make you money. So what a really important thing as from a sales manager perspective is to start seeing things, if we go back to this spectrum, is to actually see this as more of a, where do we want our sales team's time to be spent? Now, if you break it down to the prospecting and the quoting and closing side of things again, let's go to the quoting and closing first, because, we've already established that that's the bit that's actually going to make you money. So, assuming that your sales team are quoting and then closing, there should be a priority in terms of their time. They should prioritize existing contracts which are out. And they should make sure that most of their time is basically, just spent on making sure that people sign the damn thing. The next thing is actually those ones where, there's actually been some level of buy-in and there's actually been some level of, positive responses. So basically there's, again, if you go back to, these are the 2 key activities, the main focus really should be on the quoting and closing bit, because, again, that's the bit that's going to make you money. The first thing should be actually getting people to sign the damn thing. So the ones where you already have the contracts out. The second thing should be following up on the ones where there has been a positive response, and it's actually ones where maybe, they've had buy-in, but it's more a case of when rather than if. The next one should actually be focusing on following up on existing quotes, ones where they've sent the quote, but they haven't heard back from them. And then the fourth one rather, should actually be on, getting quotes out, so people who said they do want a price, but you haven't actually spoken to them yet. And then, whilst it would be great if that's literally all your sales team spent their time on, and for the enterprise level companies, that's basically what they do. It's entirely lead fed. Realistically speaking, in the real world, you're probably going to need to do some prospecting as well. Again, you should treat that with the same time prioritization as, as is needed. So kind of bringing it back to, are they speaking to sales qualified leads first? Leads that have expressed intent to buy? Are they speaking to marketing qualified leads? People who have downloaded a brochure, downloaded a price list, that kind of thing, and then in regards to any actual prospecting, and actual kind of more reaching out there on the awareness level side of things, how pre-targeted have you done it? Have you at least gone to the trouble of whittling out all the people that, it's not really worth them speaking to in the first place? And, kind of really making sure that when they're approaching those people, because whilst that is a very important aspect, because fundamentally it feeds everything else, it's ultimately not the bit that's actually going to make you the money. So it's important to see it as a very calculated targeted use of their time that will come good, provided it's done well. So that's kind of my main point, really. Long story short, get the sales team as much of their time spent up on here. As much as possible, get them only quoting and closing. If they are going to do prospecting, make sure that they're spending more time on the sales qualified leads than they are on people who have never heard of you before. Yeah, so there you go.
Owen, we got one question for you with regards to sometimes it's around pre-qualification. And do you recommend, I guess this probably depends on the company size and all this sort of stuff, but having sort of an outreach team and a sales team so that your good salespeople aren't sitting there dialing 97 people that don't want to talk to them instead, and maybe having somebody at a lower cost doing that. What other sort of tips do you have to sort of get over that challenge of having to filter through potentially a large majority of your leads to get to the good ones?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a really good question. As much as possible, the best way to make more sales isn't to necessarily have to hire, a second salesperson for prospecting, especially since, and whilst I may have said all this, and whilst at the start I said, look at my credentials and things like that, ultimately, I'm not necessarily going to be the one with the data to talk about a specific sales process. You should look at what's worked for you before. But more importantly, the more that, usually the best way that you can improve in terms of selling is actually to shore up the marketing first. More leads done marketing wise and kind of done via, decent content or driving people to your website and then capturing them there. That kind of stuff is really going to catch people when they're looking. And as long as your sales team is responsive to that, then that's great. From a financial perspective, if you have established that outbound telemarketing prospecting is a good way for your particular company to make money, then looking at turning that into a more focused job role, totally, yeah, that could be really good. In regards to actually whittling contacts down, a good starting point would be to look at who's signed up to you already. That's the best way. Your existing customers are the best examples of what's worked. So if you look at the last year's worth of customers, who are they? Why did they sign up? Where did they find out about you? But then equally, the ones who said no, why did they say no? Did they drag their feet? Were they penny pinchers in the first place, so you wouldn't have wanted them? That's going to give you a really good indicator of, who's worth speaking to and who's worth, just avoiding, kind of thing.
Yep. No, great advice. So wrapping it up here, how can someone get a hold of you? Obviously through the event app, but if they're watching this recorded at a later time, how can they get a hold of you to ask you some questions or get in touch?
I would love to chat. So I do a lot of sales coaching myself, and this is something that I offer. We do free sales coaching sessions to help out. How this is structured usually is as an accountability kind of thing, where we actually talk in depth about your particular sales process, and we set you some goals and basically kick your butt if you haven't done it. So there's two ways you can get in touch. If you go to parkrow.marketing, you can check out our sales blog. We also are available 24/7 via web chat. And we're super responsive as well. I think our average response time is about 25 seconds. So, I challenge you to go on there and say hi. But then also, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, so my name is Owen Pilcherwood. That's my wife and I, we've combined our names. We had a bet about whose name would go first, and she won the bet. So it's Pilcherwood as opposed to Wood Pilcher. So great. LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for sharing your expertise in this area. And for those that want to get a hold of you, I hopefully will. But thank you again.
No worries. Cool. Thanks very much.